Egypt was one of the earliest and greatest superpowers in human history. Long before modern nations existed, Egypt stood as a land of power, wealth, and influence. It was the civilization of the Pharaohs, whose rule shaped the ancient world for thousands of years. Before his passing, Prophet Muhammad clearly spoke about Egypt and its future. He gave Muslims a powerful instruction and a warning. You will conquer Egypt. When you do, treat its people kindly, because they have ties of kinship with you. This statement was not just advice, it was a prophecy. Not long after the Prophet passed away, Islam began to spread rapidly beyond Arabia. Under the leadership of Caliph Umar ibn Khattab, R.A., Muslims defeated two of the greatest empires of that time, the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. Large regions came under Muslim rule in a very short time. But suddenly, a major disaster struck. A deadly plague spread across the newly conquered land. This disease stopped the rapid expansion of the Muslims. Even worse, many of Islam's greatest military commanders were martyred during this plague. This moment became a turning point. With senior generals gone, new leaders had to rise and take responsibility. Caliph Umar carefully reorganized the military command. Among these leaders was Amr ibn al-As, R.A., a skilled commander and strategist. Umar appointed him as the army chief in the western regions. Slowly, as time passed, the plague disappeared. When Caliph Umar received news that conditions were improving, he decided to personally visit the army. He wanted to assess the situation with his own eyes. Before leaving Medina, Umar made an important decision. He handed over the administration of Medina and the Arabian Peninsula to Ali ibn Abi Talib. This decision carried great weight. If anything had happened to Umar during his journey, Ali would have become the next caliph. Umar then traveled towards Syria, where the Muslim armies were stationed. There, he met Amr ibn al-As. During their meeting, Amr presented a bold and visionary idea. He said that instead of stopping their progress, Muslims should move forward toward a land that had shaped world history for thousands of years. That land was Egypt. Egypt was not an ordinary territory. For thousands of years, it had been among the richest and most powerful regions on earth. The Quran itself refers to Egypt's prosperity and strength in multiple places. But how did Egypt become so powerful in the first place? To understand this, we must go back nearly 5,000 years. At that time, the most valuable resource in the world was not gold or weapons. It was water. Whoever controlled water controlled food, population, and power. Egypt was blessed with the greatest river known to humanity, the Nile River. Every year, the Nile flooded the land and left behind fertile soil. This allowed crops to grow in abundance. Because of this blessing, people from many regions migrated to Egypt. Cities grew, trade expanded, and wealth increased. Over time, Egypt became a center of civilization. From among these people rose a ruler named King Narmer. He united Upper and Lower Egypt and created the world's first known monarchy. This marked the birth of the Egyptian Empire. For nearly 1,000 years, Egypt dominated the known world. Its armies were strong, its economy was rich, and its culture was advanced. But long-lasting power often leads to arrogance. The pharaohs slowly began to believe that no one was greater than them. Eventually, some pharaohs made an extreme claim. They said they were not just kings, they were gods. A belief system was created where Pharaoh was worshipped. People were taught that they could only reach the afterlife by serving Pharaoh. Later, this belief evolved further. It was said that only a pharaoh whose body remained preserved after death was truly divine. This idea led to intense experiments with the human body. This is how mummification began. When a pharaoh died, his body went through a long process. Blood was removed. The brain was taken out through the nose. Internal organs were removed, while the heart was preserved. The body was dried using special salts for many days. Afterward, it was filled to maintain shape, covered with oils, and wrapped carefully. The preserved body became known as a mummy. At first, simple tombs were built over these mummies. But over time, pharaohs wanted their graves to reflect their power. The structures grew larger and more complex. This is how pyramids were born. Each pharaoh wanted his pyramid to be greater than the one before. This competition pushed construction to unimaginable levels. Pharaoh Khufu built the greatest pyramid of all. For more than 3,500 years, it remained the tallest structure ever built by humans. Even today, its size and weight are beyond belief. However, this ambition came at a cost. Building pyramids drained Egypt's wealth. Resources were exhausted. The economy slowly weakened. For the first time in centuries, Egypt began to lose its superpower status. During this fragile period, a young boy was brought to Egypt as a slave. That boy was Prophet Yusuf a.s. Through wisdom and patience, Yusuf rose to become a high-ranking official. He managed Egypt's economy during a severe famine and saved the land from collapse. Egypt became strong once again. After Yusuf passed away, his descendants, Bani Israel, continued to live in Egypt. Over time, they grew in number and influence. But history took another dark turn. A new pharaoh came to power and feared Bani Israel. He enslaved them and imposed brutal oppression. For nearly 400 years, Bani Israel lived as slaves. Then Allah sent Prophet Musa a.s. Despite Pharaoh's attempts to kill him, Musa survived and was raised in Pharaoh's own palace. When Musa became a prophet, he stood before Pharaoh with a clear demand: freedom for Bani Israel. After many signs and miracles, Pharaoh agreed, but later broke his promise. When Pharaoh chased them with his army, Allah intervened. The sea was parted. Musa and Bani Israel crossed safely. Pharaoh and his army were drowned. This moment marked the collapse of Pharaoh's absolute power. After the death of Pharaoh Ramses, Egypt never returned to its former glory. The age of pharaohs ended. In the centuries that followed, Egypt was ruled by many foreign powers. Among them were Alexander the Great and later the Roman Empire. The Romans controlled Egypt for almost 600 years. Finally, the time came for the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad to be fulfilled. Under Caliph Umar ibn Khattab, Muslim armies stood at the gates of Egypt, not as conquerors driven by greed, but as carriers of a message that had been promised long before. History was about to change forever. The Muslim conquest of Egypt, the fall of a superpower. After centuries of foreign rule, Egypt stood at a turning point. For nearly 600 years, the Roman Empire controlled Egypt with iron authority. Heavy taxes, religious oppression, and injustice had crushed the local population. The people of Egypt were tired, poor, and waiting for change. At this historic moment, Muslim armies stood at Egypt's borders under the leadership of Caliph Umar ibn Khattab. The commander chosen for this mission was Umar ibn al-As. He understood its geography, its people, and its strategic importance. With Umar's permission, he marched toward Egypt with a small but disciplined army. This was not a massive force. It was an army built on faith, discipline, and purpose. Their first major target was Fustat, near modern-day Cairo. The Roman Empire immediately realized the danger. They sent reinforcements and prepared for war. One of the strongest Roman fortresses stood in their way, Fort Babylon. This fortress was heavily guarded and considered nearly impossible to capture. The siege lasted for months. Roman forces believed the Muslims would give up. But patience was one of the Muslims' greatest strengths. During this time, Caliph Umar closely monitored every development from Medina. He sent guidance, reinforcements, and clear instruction. Finally, after intense struggle, Fort Babylon fell. This was a shocking blow to Roman power. But Umar ibn al-As did not rush blindly. He followed Islamic principles of war. Civilians were protected. Churches were not destroyed. Forced conversion was forbidden. The local Egyptian population, especially the Coptic Christians, noticed something different. For the first time in centuries, they were treated with justice. As a Muslim army advanced, city after city opened its gates, not by force, but by agreement. The Romans slowly retreated toward Alexandria, the crown jewel of Egypt. Alexandria was not just a city. It was one of the greatest centers of learning, trade, and culture in the ancient world. The Romans made their final stand there. Once again, a long siege began. But Roman morale was already broken. They were fighting far from home, defending an empire that no longer cared for them. Eventually, a peace treaty was signed. The Romans agreed to leave Egypt. In the year 641 CE, Egypt officially came under Muslim rule. But here's the most important part. There was no massacre. There was no forced conversion. There was no destruction of civilization. Churches remained standing. People were free to practice their religion. Taxes were reduced. Justice replaced corruption. This was the practical fulfillment of the words of Prophet Muhammad. You will conquer Egypt. When you do, treat its people kindly, because they have ties of kinship with you. Egypt, which had once been ruled by self-proclaimed gods, was now governed by humility and accountability. Amr ibn al-As established Fustat as the new capital. This city later became the foundation of Islamic Cairo. Under Muslim rule, Egypt slowly regained stability. Trade flourished. Agriculture improved. Knowledge spread. Egypt was no longer a superpower built on arrogance, but a civilization rebuilt on justice. For centuries afterward, Egypt became a center of Islamic learning, scholarship, culture, trade. The land of the Pharaohs had entered a new chapter, not erased, not destroyed, but transformed, from gods to kings, from kings to empires, from empires to accountability. Egypt's story proved one eternal truth. No power lasts forever, except truth and justice.
Like and subscribe for expensive videos.